Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Spin Cycle. My name is Colin, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to adjust the parking brake in your FC. But first things first, I need to go and get some coffee.
Yeah, may I please have a large cold brew?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one. Oh, that's the good stuff. You know, they like to advertise that America runs on Dunkin'. Colin runs on Dunkin'. Well, that is much better. So let's talk about the parking brake. Now, you might be a new FC owner, or maybe an FC owner that has never had a parking brake that is performed to your expectations. And by that, I mean holding the car securely in place on any sort of significant incline. But before I go any farther, I do want to stress the fact that the FC does not have a very powerful parking brake. And by that, I mean there are a lot of cars out there that at considerable speed, you can yank that handbrake up and it'll lock the rear wheels very aggressively. And the FC is never going to be one of those cars. This is why so many people that are into things like drifting install a hydraulic handbrake system, and sometimes even a second set of rear calipers so that that hydraulic handbrake can be as aggressive as possible. So if that's what you are looking for, then you are going to have to look into installing a system like that. However, if you are just looking for your car to be parked securely in place and not roll down a hill when you walk away from it, that is what I'm going to show you how to fix today. You're not going to need too much to do this other than a hydraulic floor jack, a couple of jack stands, a 10mm deep socket, extension, and ratchet, a Phillips head screwdriver, and something to use as a pry tool if necessary. The first thing you're going to want to do is to lift the rear of the car in the air and set it securely on jack stands. So let's get started. So as you can see, it's actually a pretty simple system. You've got your parking brake lever here, and that acts on a single cable that runs underneath the transmission tunnel back to a splitter where it divides off into the cables for the right and left rear brake calipers. So when you pull up on the handbrake, what's happening is you're pulling this cable forward, and that actuates the parking brake mechanism in both rear calipers. What we're going to be doing today, if I scroll up here, is adjusting this nut here. And in doing that, you're changing the effective length of the parking brake cable, that single cable. So once that's adjusted properly, you should have a fairly effective parking brake. The first thing you're going to need to do is go ahead and slide your driver's seat forward in order to gain access to a Phillips head screw right there. Now remove the Phillips head screw that is holding the two halves of the parking brake trim together. And with that screw out, you can go ahead and pry the two halves apart. There's one piece. The other one you're gonna kind of have to play with a little bit in order to get it out. And there we go. So with the trim off, you can now see the adjustment nut, which is right here. There's also a little collar around it that prevents it from walking itself out of adjustment, and that just simply pulls off. Now that you have access to the adjustment nut, go ahead and pump your brake pedal a couple of times, just to get rid of any vacuum that might be left over in the system if you drove the car recently, and so that the rear brake calipers are in a natural resting position. With the transmission in neutral and the parking brake disengaged, go ahead and give your rear wheels a spin. This is just to check that we don't have any dragging of the rear brake calipers before we start the adjustment process. We're going to check it again after we adjust the parking brake, just to ensure that the brakes aren't dragging after the fact either. Now go ahead and take your 10mm socket and adjust the nut either clockwise or counterclockwise depending on which way you need to go. If you rotate it clockwise and shorten the length of the cable, it's going to shorten the throw of the parking brake lever. If your parking brake is much too tight and there's not enough throw, then you would go counterclockwise. So the factory service manual states that when you pull on the handbrake with about 22 pounds of force, you should have 4 to 5 clicks of the ratcheting mechanism to the parking brake being fully engaged. Go ahead and check it every now and again just to see where you're at. Parking brake cables do stretch over time with use, so the problem isn't always necessarily that somebody has misadjusted the parking brake, as this stretching does occur eventually. So that should about do it. Now I'm going to spin the wheels again and make sure that the brakes aren't dragging. So this one looks good, and I've already spun the other side, so I'm going to go ahead and put the trim back around the parking brake lever and get the car back on the ground. With that adjustment made, you should now have a parking brake that is far more effective than it was before. However, if you are still experiencing a significant issue with your parking brake, then you probably have something going on in the rear calipers likely to do with the parking brake mechanisms themselves, and there are adjustments that you can make to them. And I will of course direct you to the section and page of the factory service manual where you're going to find that information should you need it. That does it for this episode, and as always, I hope you guys learned something that you can apply to your own car. Additional information will of course be posted in the description box below. Please like or dislike the video and give me some feedback as to why either way. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, but until next time guys, take care.